Hello everyone, today it is a day of celebration in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. Though in the long run I'm sure that given it is the Clown Decade, the tiny bit of respite we are getting here will frankly not last very long. So what am I talking about? Well, as you can tell from the title, we get a little bit of respite because just yesterday I was dreading the news that the Chagos Island deal gets the green light. The agreement to surrender the archipelago has been delayed by political turmoil in the UK, US and Mauritius, but Downing Street has finally lifted objections, probably by throwing more money at the problem, and this was already costing officially $9 billion, but there are other estimates putting it to double that price. Or to give away our very own sovereign territory, and I have been writing to my MP about this about 4 times. Every time I just get I get the standard Labour reply. Here's all the legalese of it. It's the right thing to do. There's nothing I can do to stop it. And my MP didn't even bother writing to the Foreign Secretary about my concerns. So what a useless MP that is. So government sources confirmed that the agreement had been ready for months after Trump gave the plan the green light when Sir Keir Starmer visited the White House in February. Great. So giving Trump a letter from the King basically ruined our own sovereignty. Thank you very much for that, Keir Starmer. But the formal signing had been blocked by Number 10 over concerns of a toxic backlash after Labour's disastrous local election result this month. What, and you decided now is the time that the backlash is over? Are you kidding me? Were you hoping that the net migration figures coming out today would cover this? I don't think anything's covering this. This is the most stupid deal I've ever seen in my life. There's a very clear pattern with Labour, especially this Labour government, in that every deal they make is effectively Britain gets the awful end of the stick, whereas whoever we're dealing with, whether it be the EU or Mauritius, gets everything and more that they want. It's crazy. Tories were better than this, honestly. Zero-seaters didn't know what they were talking about. I voted Reform, by the way, but, if you had someone like, I don't know, Katie Lamb or Robert Jenrick, it would have been better than this. Senior aides to the PM were concerned about the government agreeing to pay Mauritius millions of pounds a year when ministers were pushing through welfare cuts and refusing to budge on winter fuel payments. The deal will be signed only a day after Starmer announced a U-turn on the latter. Again, they're trying to bury this in some good news, but I don't think anything can possibly bury this. The only thing that could save this is if it turned out Starmer cured cancer or something. This is how absolutely ridiculous the deal is. Again, we have a naval base, a joint US naval base, with the Americans there. I think it's a air base as well, actually. And we're giving this away to Mauritius to then rent it back off them for the Americans, while also giving them foreign aid money. Again, it's going to cost like $18 billion over 99 years. Most of that payment front-loaded. This is all while the government is also borrowing something like £20 billion a month, which is more than the estimated income from both the Indian deal and the EU deal put together. This isn't sustainable at all, and they're still giving away money. Your money, my money, well, if you're British, of course. There's nothing about this government that looks remotely sustainable. I'm shocked it doesn't even look like it's going to collapse anytime soon. The worst thing that it looks like is going to happen is Starmer gets defenestrated for, obviously, Angela Rayner. And things are going to get way worse if that happens. A government source said the discussions about when the announcement should be made has been bouncing along. The Foreign Office and Starmer's National Security Advisor are among those pushing for a deal to be signed, but it had been blocked. The plan to hand over control of the Chagos Islands, officially known as British Indian Ocean Territory, was announced last October after negotiations with Pravind Jugnauth, the Prime Minister of Mauritius, and I've covered that over and over and over again because this is one of the stupidest deals that I think you could ever write. Obviously, both the Tories, but who cares what they have to say, and Reform UK have been completely opposed to all this. It's just ridiculous. Badenoch saying, it's not in our national interest to give the islands away and pay for the privilege of doing so. Absolutely correct. Nigel Farage was a little harsher, saying, if the Chagos Islands have to be given away, the UK should be handing it over to the US rather than Mauritius, since they are corrupt. And he told the Commons last year that they are clearly hell-bent on giving away the Chagos Islands, whatever the risk to global security, whatever the risk to our own budgetary constraints. Absolutely true. The treaty formally handing over sovereignty will be introduced to Parliament using the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010, which limits MPs' power to try and block it. by setting a 21-day deadline for ratification. Unless either the Commons or the Lords passes a resolution rejecting the deal in that time, it's automatically ratified. I have no doubt in my mind that was a David Cameron act. Literally put in an act of parliament that stops elected MPs from stopping one of the stupidest deals known to man. Even so, Starmer's got such a stonking majority, he can just use the whip to pass it through anyway, so I don't know why he's bothering to do that. At least make it look democratic. So the Times also mentions that we're giving Mauritius about £90 million a year for this, and that rises with inflation, by the way. That is linked to inflation, so that's going up every year. And these estimates are based on the $63 million annual rent paid by the US to Djibouti, the rent camp Lemonnier, an American military base in the Horn of Africa. The precise amount is expected to be published when the treaty is logged in Parliament. So, no doubt in my mind, it's actually going to be more than is estimated, because that's how this always works. Honestly, absolutely ridiculous deal. Can't believe it got this close to going ahead. But luckily, as I say, it is being delayed yet again before the parliamentary recess. Because the High Court has blocked the Chagos deal at the 11th hour, literally the last minute. We're talking very early hours in the morning. The government has been temporarily banned from concluding its negotiations after an injunction was issued in the early hours. So the court ruling signed at 2:25 AM on Thursday, literally less than 8 hours before Keir Starmer was planning to sign off on this deal, forbade ministers from taking any conclusive or legally binding step to conclude its negotiations with the Mauritian government. The lead claimant, Beatrice Pomp, a former Chagos resident, sought an interim injunction to stop the Prime Minister signing the deal, which was expected to happen on Thursday morning. I never thought I'd say this, ever, by the way, but thank God for lawfare. Legal wrangling over the matter is expected to continue from 10:30 AM. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, and top generals are due to make the announcement this morning at the central hub for British military operations in Northwood, North London. They're expected to set out the military case for the deal and plan for continuing operations. Oh my goodness. What could the military case possibly be? Well, it doesn't matter, we'll largely be running it as we did anyway. It just costs us more money now because we're not running it ourselves anymore. We have to rent it off Mauritius. Incredible. Shortly before the event was due to take place, the Minister of Defence cancelled it. Well, I would imagine as soon as they woke up and saw these messages about Chagos being stopped, it was a very quick, right, don't do it anymore, it's pointless. And hopefully this injunction completely stops it, or at least puts it to a free vote into Parliament, which, if they do the whip system then, it's just ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous how many steps and hoops they are willing to go through to give away sovereign territory at our own expense. It's crazy. All because one of Starmer's friends went over to the International Court at the UN to make the case for Mauritius against Britain, and he was even very proud of it. In fact, here's the famous clip of him talking about it.
We were talking earlier in the student event about the fact that you've taken on a lot of cases against the UK, your home country, and that's completely acceptable.
Yeah, it's a really fantastic thing about Britain, that I think it's probably the only country in the world where, when you've been to an international court against your own country, won and humiliated them completely, they still celebrate you.
Yes, that is Keir Starmer's friend, Professor Philippe Sands, KC, effectively gloating that he humiliated Britain at the International Court of Justice at the UN, representing Mauritius against Britain. And he's saying it's great how people celebrate that. The only people celebrating are his friends, the complete oikophobes, people who hate the British, for trying to use lawfare to, again, humiliate them and end us in a position where we are giving away money to give away our own land. He is laughing about it. He is saying, isn't it great? The British just love to harm themselves, and I find that incredible and something to celebrate, when in reality people are trying to vote Reform UK to stop this exact type of thing happening. I'm yet to see an actual Labour voter try and defend all this. Because every basic argument they try and make, oh, well, wasn't it Mauritius in the first place? No, it's like 4,000 miles away from them. It's not that much, but I'm using hyperbole. Oh, well, didn't they used to own it? No, it was always under British control. When Mauritius got its independence, Chagos Islands were completely separate from it. It has never been Mauritius's. It's never legally been Mauritius's, and the only reason the ICJ managed to come to that conclusion is because, effectively, of lawfare. Oh, and also when you explain that international law doesn't really exist, their brain tends to fall out their ears. Anyway, as I say, this is very good news. So a government spokesperson said, "We do not comment on ongoing legal cases. This deal is the right thing to protect the British people and our national security by giving away our own island with our naval base on it. Yes. The move has hampered Starmer's plan to sign off on the deal, which has been criticised by the Conservatives and Reform. Plans to hand over control of Chagos, which the government said would safeguard the future of a crucial military base." Just ridiculous. Ridiculous thing to say. To Mauritius were first announced last October. However, the deal was delayed when Mauritius Prime Minister was replaced, and to give the incoming Trump administration time to consider the plan, which I'm still not sure why they have gone through with the plan. You had Republican senators saying that this was absolutely crazy, and from what I can tell, it's simply Starmer went over, handed him a letter from the king, and well, Trump was so enamoured, he's just like, right, do what you want, it's fine, I'll sign off on it. To be honest with you, the US get to keep the base, and so as long as they've got a contract to keep the base, I think they don't really care. I think that's just the long and short of it. So the Times goes through the person behind this injunction. The claimant behind the dramatic late-night injunction is a native Chagossian who wants to remain British and have the right to return to the island where she was born, which probably wouldn't happen under Mauritius, that is true. Beatrice Pomp, who was born on Diego Garcia and is a British citizen, said the government is making the same mistake which it made 60 years ago, when the Chagossians were forced to leave the Indian Ocean Territory in 1973 to make way for the military base. What exactly the Chagossians want to return for, I couldn't exactly tell you. They say a Chagossian native, which I don't particularly have an issue with, but the thing is that the first Chagossian natives, if you want to put it that way, were obviously slaves, and they were moved over there in about the 1700s. So it's about 200 years or so of generations. I'm not complaining or anything about that, it's just showing how short term that can actually be to, one, call yourself a native of somewhere, and not only that, but fight lawfare to say I should have a right to go back there, and giving away the islands doesn't allow me to do that. You know, this is the type of argument that I'd usually say is a bit ridiculous, but this deal is so much more ridiculous. Go for it, you know? It'd be great. Pomp says that the island should remain British and feels her people have been treated so poorly by the government over its handling of the deal with Mauritius. I largely do agree. So Chagossians were removed from their place of birth without a consultation. That was obviously to make the military base to, have a geopolitically strategic point in the Indian Ocean to, we were at a Cold War with the Soviets at that point. Plus, it's not too far away from the Middle East, which was also strategically important. And have been treated badly for 60 years, she previously told The Telegraph. Since then, we've been struggling to understand why we've been treated so poorly by the British government. Our human rights been stripped away. Well, it was a bit of give and take, to be honest. As far as I'm aware, they weren't given too much compensation, but some was given. And then, I don't know how they managed to do this, but the British sent some to Mauritius, and they were treated quite poorly, from what I understand. And some were invited over to Britain, and those are the ones, obviously, that got British citizenship, which seems to be the type of people who were treated better, let's say. So today the government is repeating the same mistakes which it made 60 years ago. All our suffering and cries to be heard have been falling on deaf ears. I want to stay British, and I also want the right to return to the Chagos Islands, which obviously should be some of our overseas territories. Her lawyer, Michael Polak, said the legal action, which was aimed at challenging the legitimacy of handing over the agreement without formal consultation with the Chagossians, which is just incredible. So the ICJ managed to make this ruling based on, effectively, consultation with Mauritius. That's all that really mattered to them. And then when it comes to actually handing it over, it's now, well, hang on, now you have to actually talk to the natives of that island and see what they want to say about all this, because just handing it over is a breach of their human rights or something like that. So all this stuff I've been complaining about for ages finally comes in handy, but this wouldn't even be an issue in the first place if it didn't exist in the first place. So, where do you go from there? The government is attempting to cede the Chagossians' homeland without holding genuine consultation with those who have the closest connection to these islands. This is a continuation of the mistreatment they have suffered in the past. Okay. Pomp has been joined in the legal action by fellow Chagossian Bernadette Dugas, who said the proposed agreement was harmful to the islanders. If you're wondering why they all have these French-sounding names, it's because the French owned the Chagos Islands first and then we took it over. And obviously when it comes to the slaves that were already there and that we obviously eventually freed, they came from generations who would have inherited names from the French. This agreement will prevent me from returning to Diego Garcia, where I was born. It only exacerbates the suffering of the Chagossians. Well, you know what? Usually I find these arguments somewhat cringe, but as long as it's stopping Starmer doing one of the stupidest things he can do with this deal, I'm all for you making these arguments. Anyway, obviously this has been a slow-motion car crash from Starmer, and now you couldn't write what happened this morning. And even Yes Minister, I don't think even they thought anything this absurd could happen. But you might be wondering what the rush was to get it signed by 10 AM this morning. Well, one, parliamentary recess is incoming, so if he signed this off, he wouldn't have any scrutiny from Parliament, any questions from Parliament as they're about to go into the Whitsun recess, as it is known, which is about a week and a half long, and so he wouldn't have any scrutiny for a week and a half. And a lot can happen in politics in a week and a half, so I assumed he'd wait for something to overtake the bad news of getting rid of the Chagos with our own money. But not only that, Number 10 will also have known that there was a press briefing about net migration numbers halving in the UK this year, as they have gone down from about 860,000 to about 431,000 last year, which obviously the Labour government are going to want to take some credit for, but given that they only got into power last summer and made no changes to immigration till this year, this is frankly all down to the Tories, which who have managed to still put net migration well above the numbers that they were before COVID. And the numbers were always going to come down somewhat post-COVID, because obviously COVID stopped all sorts of immigration for a while, and then obviously you get a spike up as it recovers, along with, of course, the stupid decision by Boris Johnson to make visas easier to get. They brought in the points-based immigration system, which somehow also made immigration even easier. And of course, there is the other famous one of there used to be a law where you had to advertise your jobs to British people only for 6 months, I think it was, and then it could open up to foreign workers. Got rid of that rule, and it didn't really help the economy, surprisingly. So this whole, every major party now goes against the idea that migration leads to a better economy. Nobody buys it anymore. Anyway, an awful lot of this decline, again, is from the Tory change to their own rules, which meant that dependent visas for uni students and other workers were effectively cut, and you saw an 86% reduction there, and also doubling the required salary threshold for the points-based system to just under £40,000. And British residents need an income of at least £29,000 to allow foreign dependents to come over. And these, of course, were measures brought in by Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly back in December 2023, and they were hoping that that would reduce migration by about 300,000 a year, which pretty much did happen. But again, these are numbers that are still way above numbers that caused the Brexit vote. It's still far too much and nowhere near the numbers where we need it, but the official narrative now is going to be, oh, look at all that Starmer has done to reduce immigration. Tories couldn't do that. They're going to try and do that, but obviously it was Tories that did this. But even so, the Tories did nowhere near enough, and that's why I'm still voting reform. So that's why Keir Starmer wanted to rush this through, particularly this week. Thankfully he's been stopped, and hopefully the legal injunctions will cost too much to make the deal worth it. That's absolutely not happening, by the way. They will spend all the money they want to try and get this deal through, or because they are absolute crazy people in Parliament who see this deal as absolutely necessary because an international court said so. This is how these people think. A court said we have to do it, therefore we're going to do it. You don't want to be in trouble with the law, do you? International courts have absolutely no power, so I don't really care. And it still amazes me that Trump greenlit it, but, well, I suppose it was always going to be a bit of a risk relying on him to stop this, but there we go. Right, anyway, I think that's everything I had for you for today. So, Shill time. Tonight it's going to be some Subnautica gameplay, going from about 9 o'clock tonight. Next Tuesday we have Tosh Talks, don't know what the topic's going to be yet. And then on Thursday more Subnautica, and then Saturday we'll have some Laughing at the Guardian. So do look forward to all that. Right, if you are a fan of the channel and you are not subscribed, definitely subscribe. And of course leave a like and a comment, great ways to help out the channel. If you can spare a little bit of money though, you could always become a channel member or leave a super chat or super thanks, also great ways to help out the channel. Right, with that, everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.